I'm Giorgio. For those who don't know me, I'm the tour operations manager and tour leader at Walk Japan. Everyone at Walk Japan joins as a tour leader, and even managers and directors. I always make sure are running at least one tour a year so that we can keep close to our products and our customers. I'm Italian. I was born in Venice, as you can see from my accent. I can hear my accent, but I've lived most of my adult life overseas between the UK and Japan. I've been in Japan for 16 years, and after 10 years of working in the corporate world, I received my permanent resident status and decided to leave the corporate world to join Walk Japan and embrace my passion for Japan and Japanese culture and have the opportunity to share it with you. Now, before I talk about the Nakasendo Walk Japan signature tour, I think it's important that I give you a little bit of background on the history of Walk Japan. Not only because we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, even though the circumstances are quite extraordinary, but also because it can add some context on why we do the tours we do. It all happened more than 30 years ago when Dick, who's actually here with us today, was much younger and in Japan, and he found a map of an ancient and forgotten highway. Very excited student at the time, doing some research at the Kyoto University, he decided to walk the walk and then had an amazing experience. Later in the later years, he's in Hong Kong, where he meets Tom, and the two of them are teaching Japanese geography and Japanese history, respectively, and decide to use Nakasendo as the theme for a project, a study project for the students. Very excited, they all come to Japan, and the project is so successful that Tom and Dick's peers and colleagues and friends asked them to take them to Japan, and the rest is history. 30 years later, here we are with more than 20 tours and a variety of tours that we can use to introduce the rural areas of Japan. In doing so, we offer an opportunity to walk along the off the beaten track and also meet the locals. And more importantly, we give an opportunity for these rural communities to thrive and attract young talent. It's been the case, of course, for the Kiso area, where the core of the Nakasendo walk is, but also of other areas like the Kunisaki Peninsula down in Kyushu, where we have our operational base. Now, this also explains why we have a presence in Hong Kong still. But now, let's move on to today's topic. I've taken a screenshot of our homepage, which shows the details of the Nakasendo. And today, I don't necessarily want to do a virtual tour of the Nakasendo per se. I want to start with the technical details and get the information that is often asked by customers when they first approach us. It's a 10-night, 11-day tour. It starts in Kyoto and ends in Tokyo. And we have classified this as activity and technical level 3, respectively. But what does that mean for anyone wanting to join us on tour? On this tour, we'll be walking between 10 to 25 kilometers, that's 6 to about 15 miles each day. The daily walks, they last between 4 to 6 hours, and the pace is very relaxed. We walk at a 2 kilometer per hour and never more than 4 kilometers per hour. That's in miles, 1.25 to 2.5. It gives us time to take photographs, and your tour leader will stop at strategic spots to introduce the history of the Nakasendo and the background of the places that we visit, as well as the people that we meet. It's a tour that can run pretty much all spring and autumn, and we have shorter versions also in the hot summers and cold winters. One last thing to mention on this before we move on to the next slide is group size. We never have groups of more than 12 people, and this allows us to keep it cozy and have enough time, dedicate enough time to each and every one who joins us on tour. I'm sure some of you will be terrified by this graph here. I had to compress 500 kilometers in one slide, so that's why it looks like we're climbing mountains and there's a lot of peaks. It is actually not the case. I just wanted to show you how impressive this walk is. It starts in Kyoto and ends in Tokyo. Ironically, both city names are covered by these little cursors. And it goes on for 500 kilometers. In the bottom, in the top left-hand corner, you have a daily breakdown of all the places that we visit. And in the bottom section, you have the mode of transport. The green sections are on foot. And then we've got a number of express or local and even bullet, Shinkansen bullet train sections. Looking at this graph, I'm sure that day 7 here and day 10 here look terrifying. So I've decided to add a couple of slides to give you a better representation of what we do on the day, but also to give you an idea of what you can expect. Day 7 is our longest day. We walk 24 kilometers, so 15 miles approximately, and we go from Otsumago to Tsumago. Let's look at probably what's the most interesting part. This is the graph. See the difference in the elevation gain. Here it looks like a very, very steep ascent, where in fact it's a gentle undulating up. We usually use this term, ascent from Otsumago to the Nenoue Pass, and then a quick descent to Nojiri, where we catch a train to Kiso Fukushima, but not before having had a cold beer or a nice slice of cake. Now, this is a section of a document that you will receive before joining the tour, which has a wealth of information on the tour itself, the itinerary, places that we visit, what we do, and it really helps you prepare for the Nakasendo. This is day 10. Remember the very steep descent here? It's actually not so bad. On day 10, we walk from Karuizawa back to Tokyo via the Usui Pass. It's a 16-kilometer or 10-mile walk. And as you can see, after a short ascent from Karuizawa town to the Usui Pass, we go down a 12-kilometer or so descent into Yokogawa. From Yokogawa, we take a local train and then a fast bullet train to Tokyo, where we visit Nihonbashi, where it all starts. Something else that is often asked is what gear do we need? What's that type of backpack? You'll be happy to know that the Nakasendo has been improved year after year by us. And whereas in the beginning, we used to carry 7 days or 10 days worth of stuff with us every day, one day someone had the brilliant idea of saying, well, why don't we use a taxi? And so we started using the sophisticated luggage delivery service or other means of transportation, which means we travel very light when we're walking. My backpack is probably 35 liters, and as you can see, there's a bear bell and an umbrella. Inside my backpack, I've got a pair of walking sticks, my bento, my lunchbox, and a first aid kit. This is actually not a picture of the Nakasendo, it's a picture of another tour, the Basho tour, and I can reassure you that these white carrier bags are not part of my usual outfit. I just made a fatal error of stopping and asking a question. And that led me to carry 15 kilos of potatoes for about, 2 big bags of potatoes for about 15 kilometers. But now let's begin talking really about the Nakasendo. Let's understand first the meaning of the word, Nakasendo. What does Nakasendo mean? Naka is middle, sen or san is mountain, and do is road. So literally the road through the middle of the mountains. And this is why it was popular. Sticking to mountain ridges meant fewer dangerous river crossings. And so its relative isolation is also the very reason it still survives today. Some people call it Nakasendo Trail, Nakasendo Highway. We call it Nakasendo Way. And my personal explanation for this is that this character here, it is the character for road, but it is also the character for many disciplines like judo, martial arts, tea ceremony, or calligraphy. So for us, Nakasendo is a way of life. Some of you may be familiar with this map because it's from our homepage, and it gives another visual explanation of the Nakasendo Way. This one has all the stopping point. We will be stopping at castle towns, post towns, and barrier towns, and we'll learn what they were and what their purpose was. But Nakasendo was a highway that connected Kyoto and Edo, which is now called Tokyo, over an inland route that passed 500 kilometers, or roughly 300 miles, through the heart of the island of Honshu, the main island of Japan. It is a very old highway. It was established in around the 8th century when the capital of Japan was here, in the bottom left, in Nara, in an attempt to knit a network within Nara and the provinces of Japan. Now, it is not until the Edo period, we're talking 1600 to 1868, that the Nakasendo reached the peak of its development. But by this time, interestingly enough, the power has shifted here to Edo, nowadays Tokyo, on the opposite end of the road. But why? There was a battle that was fought in Sekigahara, right here, in 1600. And this battle unified Japan under the leadership of the shogunate, Tokugawa shogunate. It was a regime, and the shogunate is named after the title of the shogun, who was the most powerful military man in Japan. So in the Edo period, the shogunate wants to establish a communication system which would allow him to move quickly and efficiently messengers, personnel, diplomatic missions, and and also goods between Edo and the various provinces. As you can see, Nakasendo is not the only highway. There are other highways here. There's the Nikko Kaido connecting Edo or Tokyo with the lovely Nikko, where the mausoleum of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the first Tokugawa shogun, is. We have the Koshu Kaido that connects Nakasendo via the Yamanashi area, and then there's the Tokaido, which is along the Ocean Pacific coast. The Tokaido, admittedly, was the busiest and most traveled highway. But as you can see, its location meant crossing here by boat, and also its exposure to tsunami, possibility of tsunami, or when heavy rains, it made it a very easily disrupted journey. Nakasendo, in its isolation, was a perfect solution to travel via the mountains. So nowadays, as I mentioned, Nakasendo retains most of its charm, But the Tokaido has been heavily laid with train lines and a bullet Shinkansen bullet train line that connects Tokyo with Kyoto and Osaka is also named after this old highway. It's the Tokaido Shinkansen. We are in Kyoto and it's day one. At 6 p.m. you meet your tour guide, your tour leader, and you have an orientation briefing which is aimed at ensuring that you have a safe, enjoyable, and great tour with us. We have dinner at a restaurant nearby, and this is the Sanjo Ohashi, a very important bridge where we start our first walk. We walk in the areas of Pontocho and Gion, and if we're lucky enough, we may see a geisha in training, Maiko. And it really makes us feel like we're going back in time. This is a woodblock print of Sanjo Ohashi back in the days. And this is one of the highlights of the Nakasendo tour for me. I always feel like I'm traveling back in time, and it's a really cathartic and great experience. On day 2, we make our way to Kyoto station, and I am a bit of a train spotter. I worked for the railways for many years and I love trains. So I always make sure that we have at least 15 minutes to explore this fantastic work of architecture of Hiroshi Hara. It was built in 1997 and it's an incredibly complex looking building, but with a very simple concept behind it. This is supposed to be in natural geographical valley. And so the direction of travel of people is either up or down. If you're visiting the stores, the department stores, and the roof terrace, where you can see the mountains from the previous woodblock print. But if you're traveling by train, and you arrive in Kyoto station, you travel north to south or south to north in this direction if you're arriving in Kyoto, or if you're like us catching a train from Kyoto in this direction. So it flows really well, and despite the incredibly complex design, it's a relatively easy to navigate station, or so it seems. Off we go onto platform 0, usually, it seems like a Harry Potter movie, and we're going to Hikone, which is a lovely little town in the Shiga prefecture. It takes us less than an hour to get there, and here we are. But why do we visit Hikone? Here we need to time travel back 60 years or so, a little bit longer, to the 16th century when the Warring State period is in Japan. Japan has been the scene of a constant state internal conflicts for more or less 400 years, where growth has not been possible. In this period, in the 16th century, 3 great people work hard towards the unification of Japan, which really happens with the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. But who are these men? The first, Oda Nobunaga, is the first unifier of Japan. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second unifier of Japan. And then we have Tokugawa Ieyasu, the third and final great man who wins the Battle of Sekigahara and finally unifies the country. In order to understand the different characters of these 3 people, in Japan we have a very interesting story. There's we have the 3 of them in front of a cuckoo bird, but the cuckoo bird doesn't sing. Nobunaga says to the bird, "Hey, little bird, if you don't sing, I will kill you." Toyotomi Hideyoshi says to the bird, "Hey, little bird, if you don't sing, I'll make you sing." And Tokugawa Ieyasu says to the bird, "Hey, little bird, if you don't sing, I'll wait for you to sing." This is a great, simple but great explanation of the different characters that these people had, which were needed because of the time that they lived in. But you're still wondering why Hikone? Well, any powerful family needs powerful support. One of Tokugawa Ieyasu's strengths was the ability to build networks that and alliances with people. Hikone was to be the home of an important family that supported the Tokugawa regime for the whole duration of the 268 years that they were in power. Here we have I Naomasa, a warrior of the Sengoku warring period times, who fought along Tokugawa Ieyasu in the Battle of Sekigahara. He also fought along his son-in-law. Incidentally, his daughter was married to the fourth son of Tokugawa Ieyasu. So you see how strategic alliances were formed. He was wounded in battle and then later died. The second important character, or famous character, that comes from the I family is I Naosuke. We now fast forward 260 years or so to the end of the Edo period. We have a very weakened regime, and Inosuke makes the fatal mistake of signing a treaty without the blessing or permission, even if a formality, of the emperor, and is assassinated in the famous Sakuradamon incident in the imperial gardens in Edo. Naosuke, was an accomplished tea master, a lover of No, and when we visit his house, we will see in the castle a great exhibition with a lot of objects in display. He is also the one to whom a very interesting idiom is attributed. It's in Japanese, Ichigo Ichie, which means one time, one meeting. It really relates to tea ceremony, but also can be expanded and extended to everyday life. Each moment only happened once, and so we need to enjoy it and appreciate its beauty. And it's the spirit in which I want everyone to come and walk the Nakasendo. This is the emblem, the crest of the family I. And this is the castle national treasure and its beautiful gardens. If we're lucky with the weather, we can have a lovely picnic in this area before making our way to Sekigahara, the battlefield, or the most important battle in Japanese history. But before then, we may be lucky enough to meet Hikonyan. Nyan is the sound of cats in Japan and is the mascot of Hikone Castle. I think it's about 16 years old. Here I am with Christina, Yo, and Toru on a tour leader training tour a few years back. And this is the battlefield. As you can see, there's not much left, but it's worth spending a little bit of time to understand the importance of this battle and how it really, really changed Japanese history. On the right-hand side, we have the crest of one of the crests of the Tokugawa family. It's a wild ginger, often said it's hollyhock, a triple hollyhock, but it's actually wild ginger. And on this side, we have the emblem of Mitsunari Ishida. One thing I should mention is that if you're born in Italy like me, we have this impression that Japan is north and south because of the way Japan is displayed on our maps. Actually, Japan is more of a west and east situation. So we've got the armies of the west led by Mitsunari Ishida, and then the army of the east led by Tokugawa Ieyasu. Interestingly enough, if you can read Chinese, you'll see that we're actually seeing the back. The flag is, due to the wind, is blowing on the other side. The emblem of the Ishida clan is a very interesting combination of 6 characters. It is read Dai Ichi, Dai Man, Dai Kichi. And its meaning in English is, if one works for the good of all, and all work for the good of one, then all will be prosperous. Well, not so much, because Ishida Mitsunari lost the battle and subsequently was beheaded. So Tokugawa wins the Battle of Sekigahara, and the Tokugawa, or Edo, named after the old name of Tokyo, begins. We have a period of 268 years of relative peace and stability, political stability for sure, economic growth, and artistical and cultural growth. Some people say that the modern Japanese cultural identity was formed during the Edo period. The country is basically closed to outsiders, a little bit like now during COVID, and there's there's a new social order, caste system with very strict rules. We have the warriors, samurai warriors at the top. We then have farmers, craftsmen, and at the bottom we've got merchants whose activities are motivated by wanting to make money. There's another class, the untouchables, and this is the class that people who do non-pure jobs, like people who handle leathers or and there is no mobility within the classes. So its social order is basically frozen. I mentioned that there's significant cultural growth, and in particular, what I'm interested in is woodblock prints. And it's here we have some woodblock prints of the post towns that we visit, some of them on the Nakasendo tour. This is Okute, which is now a very little village, but really beautiful. This is Ena, in the old days was called Oi. And this is Kiso Fukushima. They are three examples of very different post towns, and we'll spend a little bit of time later to understand what post towns were. For now, I'd like to say that I always like to compare the old and the new, the past and the present, and really look at how these places might have looked one day, and how they've changed over time. Some of them haven't changed at all. And it also gives us an idea who walked the Nakasendo in the old days, and that changed over time. This scroll, is the scroll that represents the imperial procession of Princess Kazunomiya. She walked along the Nakasendo along with other princesses. It was when they were promised to be married to the shogun. This is why sometimes the Nakasendo Way is called the Princess Highway. Princess Kazunomiya is a very loved character. She was a very well-educated lady of the court, of the imperial court of Kyoto. Remember, we have two entities now. We have the imperial court in Kyoto, and we have the shogun military power in Edo. She was very happy in Kyoto. She had a lovely prince that she had to be married to, but then she was told that she should marry the shogun. And for her, as a princess marrying a military man, she really felt probably that she was marrying down and wasn't happy, and at first refused this proposal. But eventually realized that it was a duty as a princess to do it, and the wedding was not a bad one. He only had one concubine that she agreed for him to have. But the story says that, remember, this is towards the end of the Edo period, so we have a weakened regime. There was fear that there may be attacks on the princess traveling from Kyoto to Edo, and so 15,000 retainers left Edo to pick her up in Kyoto. And it is said that 10,000 of them walked from Kyoto to Edo to protect her. You can imagine the amount of work that this created on each post town that had to provide food, accommodation, and rest for all these people. It is said that it took 3 days for the party to go through any single point. When I think of this, I wonder how these farmers, peasants, and people might have felt meeting or seeing a member of the imperial family, and the emotions and the excitement that they might have had, and how happy they might have been to be the ones who could cook for them. If you love woodblock prints like me, we actually have a chance to make our own at the wonderful Hiroshige Woodblock Print Museum in Ena, Oi, the slides that we saw earlier. And now many of the highlights of the Nakasendo are the forests and the terrain that we're very lucky to walk. Here I am again with Toru, Cristina, and Dio in a lovely section of Nakasendo. As I mentioned earlier, Nakasendo retains much of its original features, and we will see some of them from now on. There's a forest, bamboo forest here from the Nenowe pass, and so you can expect the terrain to be soft and easy to walk on. Some parts of the Nakasendo have been made into roads, but there's hardly ever any traffic. And they're lovely. I hope it's visible. They look like petals, these little roads. It's a bit like the Wizard of Oz. Here I am with some friends. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to run tours for a number of times for foreigners traveling into Japan. So I've taken this COVID time as an opportunity to take my friends on various walks that I usually do. This is us walking in the Nakatsugawa area. Some areas of the Nakasendo have what is called in Japanese ishidatami, these paving stones that were laid down on these rough patches of the road, and in particular over mountain passes, which were steep at the top and very prone to erosion during the rainy seasons. Stones were laid carefully so that porters and horses carrying baggages could have solid footing underneath them. For us, it means that when we see this, we know we're going up or down. Sometimes not stone, but steps are laid, and this is the lovely steps going up to the Jizo Pass, which connects Kiso with the Kaida Plateau, where we take a detour into the old Hita Kaido. So we're talking about mountain passes, which brings me to the next highlight of the Nakasendo tour. If it's true that it's hard to walk up, it is also true that when you reach the pass, you're blessed with these wonderful views. This is the Nishino Pass, which is the afternoon walk after the Jizo Pass that we saw earlier, and it's in the Kaida Plateau. This is part of the Hita Kaido, the old Hita Kaido that connected the Sea of Japan to the Nakasendo, often called the mackerel highway, Sabakaido, because of the fish that was carried to the heart of Japan. More views of lovely passes. Here we are at the Usui Pass, which is the one that we cross on day 10. Remember the slide I showed you earlier on. But we're not only walking through mountains and forests, we're also visiting some post towns. But so what are the post towns, and what purpose did they serve? So this is the post town of Narai, and so once a highway was designed or designated for official travel, the post towns were created at regular intervals or at strategic points just before or after a particularly challenging pass, in order to provide basically food and accommodation and rest to those people traveling to Nakasendo. In the beginning of the Tokugawa period, official travel meant messengers and diplomatic missions and so on. But over time, we have 268 years of stability. There's a shift, and we see pilgrims traveling along the Nakasendo, unofficial travelers like merchants who travel with their goods. We also see samurai lords traveling along the Nakasendo, and in virtue of the alternate residence system. So Tokugawa Ieyasu, the shogunate, did a number of things to ensure that they could stay in power after the Battle of Sekigahara. First of all, they divided the land in fiefs and destroyed many castles so that there could be only one fief and one lord, centralizing the power in a pyramid that culminated at the top with the shogun. Tokugawa Ieyasu also abdicated for his son and essentially made the title of shogun hereditary so that it could be carried in the families. He also created branches of the family which provide heirs to the Tokugawa regime that lasted until 260 years later. So these post-towns saw a change, a shift in the people who traveled, and the lords traveled because they had to have an estate in Edo. So we have a situation where the lord is in the provinces and they have an estate in Edo. But why? Their families, their wives, children were in Edo. So there's a hostage situation here, and the lords have to travel at regular intervals in order to report back to the shogun about the provinces and the work that they were doing. This kept money flowing, but also made sure that the lords could not accumulate enough wealth and think of taking the power away from the shogunate. Imagine a lord traveling from the provinces all the way to Edo along these post towns, spending money with all his retainers and servants. So it was a strategy to control them. This is the Sumago post town. We always walk here early in the morning on day 7 before we tackle the longest day of our walk. And it's lovely when we go past these towns in the morning as they're waking up. We talked about where lords, samurai lords, traveling along the Nakasendo and other highways in virtue of the Sankin Kotai, or the alternate residence system. And this is what's left of the type of accommodation that provided services to them while on in their journey. This is in Japanese called honjin, or primary accommodation. And this is the main purpose of these buildings was to provide food accommodation to the samurai lords. There's a different type of building also. This is the Tsumago. The previous one was in Ena, Oi. And this is a waki honjin. Waki honjin literally means assistant principal in. What it means that they were used when the honjin were not available. And so they didn't have regular income coming from lords staying there. And they had to diversify their business in order to make money and survive. This particular waki honjin was of the Hayashi family and was a sake brewery. Interestingly enough, when the Tokugawa Edo period ended in 1868, and people no longer traveled along when I say people, I mean the lords, samurai lords, no longer traveled along the Nakasendo, the honjin ceased, all their income ceased to come in, whereas the waki honjin had alternate income that kept them alive. For lower classes of travelers, there's correspondingly lower quality inns. On the woodblock print slide, I showed you 3 post towns. We had Okute, Ena, and Kiso Fukushima. Kiso Fukushima was a particular type of post town, which was also served as a checkpoint. That it's called a barrier town. So why would there be checkpoints? Well, we have a very strict regime that wants to control who travels along these highways. But what were they checking for? The Edo period has a policy of guns out, women in, it is often said. What does that mean? Well, it is a wooden society where fire is an enemy. It is a society where people fight with sword, where gunpowder and firearms are dangerous. So we don't want guns and fire in the towns. So this is one of the things that was checked on this barrier town. And women in. Remember, in virtue of the alternate residence system, we have ladies living in Edo. What if one or more of the ladies managed to escape and make their way to the provinces to join their lords? Well, the shogunate would have had no more leverage to control and make sure that the lord didn't plot anything against them. So they kept women in. On the other side, for the rural areas of Japan, losing women, they knew that if a woman went to Edo or Kyoto, she would have probably not come back. They would lose the ability to have children. Trust me, they had very persuasive tools to coerce confessions when somebody was caught trying to either escape or smuggle some firearms. In this case, officials from Edo, from the shogunate, would be called directly and decide the fate of these poor people, who would often be beheaded in public as a show, a display of power. Not only do we have post towns along the way, we also have tateba, or rest points, or tea houses. These were places where people would arrive, and just like we do here between Magome and Tsumago, we sit down and have a lovely cup of tea and help the local volunteers maintain this beautiful old building. Another highlight of Nakasendo is Kosatsuba, which gives you an idea of how controlling the government was at the time. As you can see, I'm wearing a poncho. It was raining on that day. Rain doesn't usually stop us. But up here, this wooden structure, it looks very old, and there's a lot of writing on it. The Japanese term is Kosatsuba. The English translation would be a bulletin, or edict. And these were rules that the shogunate imposed to travelers, and they were very clearly displayed at the entrance of the post towns so that there would be no misunderstanding. What kind of rules would this be? Some of them were very simple, like this is how much you have to pay your porter, this is how much you pay people who go on horses, please do not use drugs. Opium was known in those days. Some other ones are a little bit more frightening. As I mentioned earlier, Japan is closed at this time, and Christianity as well has been forbidden. It's illegal to be a Christian. Christianity was perceived as a military threat. Japanese people are not really concerned with religion. But being a Christian was illegal. So if anyone spotted a Christian, they would be paid some money. Please don't worry, these rules don't apply anymore, and each post town that we visit welcome us with open arms. Another interesting thing that you will see on Nakasendo, other than people bonding, because we spend a lot of time together and walk together, is these mile markers. They're called Ichirizuka, and they basically tell us where we are and how far we are from the next landmark. There's approximately, well, maybe 135 along the Nakasendo, This one is number 91 from Nihonbashi. And they're placed at a distance of roughly 4 kilometers or 2.4 miles each, which is about 45 to a minute to an hour walk. You will see a lot of these statues. You can see here on the right, left-hand corner with the yellow flowers. It's not a great quality picture. These are called dosojin, and they are guardian deities that are often associated with roads, travelers, local boundaries, and quite interesting. They protect obviously pilgrim villages and all individuals who are in transitional stages. In Shinto, a possession is a transitional stage, but an evil spirit possession, right? But also in times of epidemic. So they're protecting us now. They were assigned a task to protect the people traveling along the Nakasendo and people living in the posta. So that's where we find them very often. Earlier on, I talked about the Jizo pass, I guess, and this is a Jizo. The spelling is Jizo, and due to my accent, sometimes on some tours, people thought I was talking about Jesus, but it's not. It's a Jizo. It's a Buddhist creature who has achieved nirvana. So Bodhisattva was achieved nirvana, enlightenment, but was decided to stay behind and help us on our path to enlightenment. So they're very busy to ensure that we achieve salvation. They always have these lovely, serene faces, and we often find them on top of the passes, and it's almost healing when we arrive at the top of the pass and we see this Jizo. Because they have the ability to travel across realms of Buddhism, they are also the protectors of travelers. So they protect us when we travel along the Nakasendo. By analogy, they also protect unborn children who need to travel back from limbo to their families. Another feature of Nakasendo is Kannon. Kannon, the god or goddess of mercy, was so busy listening to her prayers that Amida Buddha felt sorry for her and gave her 33 heads so that she could listen more. Despite that, you listen more, you need to work harder because she heard more and more and more. So Amida Buddha gave her 1,000 arms. So now she's really busy with listening and fulfilling our prayers. This particular canon, you can see on top of her head as a horse. It's a bato canon or horse-headed canon. It's the deity who also protects horses, baggage-carrying horses along the way. During Nakasendo, on the Nakasendo, accommodation is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, because every day it's almost like walking back home. We meet the innkeepers who are so warm and welcome us into basically their homes and cook us lovely meals. This is Shinchaya, Minshuku, where we learn how to prepare our lovely futon mattresses. The view from the backyard of Shinchaya is pretty amazing at sunset. And in the morning, you can enjoy the beautiful rice paddies where we they grow the rice that we eat at the table. And food is another highlight that we'll talk about in a moment. But before that, I'd like to show you another inn. This is a more rural location, perhaps, with a couple of inns that we use on Nakasendo, Maruya and Tstamuraya. Tstamuraya here with this bowl is telling us that they make their own sake. So it's always nice to drink homemade sake when we go there. The inside of a rural Japanese house always has this irori, which is a fireplace. Fires would be on 24 hours a day in the old days to keep the house warm. And also the smoke produced would impregnate the walls, the wooden walls, keeping it mosquito-free and also allowing the cypress to last 1,000 years. Nowadays, the fire is only lit at night or sometimes when there are guests. And but notice here, this fish. This fish is placed above the pot, which and is used to adjust the distance of the pot from the fireplace if you want to boil water or not. A fish is a creature of water, water over fire, in a way to protect the household from fires. Fish also never blink, and their eyes are open 24 hours a day. So I call this the ancestor of our CCTV cameras. I mentioned earlier that food is one of the highlights of Nakasendo. When I joined Walk Japan, I was really hoping to lose some weight, but it didn't happen. Quite the contrary, I put on 2 kilos. Some of our customers who have been on tours with us, they want to rename the company Eat Japan, because it sometimes feels we're eating our way through Japan along the Nakasendo in this case. This is a simple, typical evening meal. There are approximately 13 dishes. Again, this is from Shinchaya. There's a selection of sashimi, some soba noodles, some fried mountain vegetables, all local products, and the rice that they grow nearby. On this particular slide, you can see here inoshishi, which in Japanese is wild boar. Mr. Hara is a hunter, and if we are lucky, or if he's lucky, we get to eat some wild boar. But if you're vegetarian, you don't need to. This is another dinner, this time at Maruya. And there's 2 types of fish, grilled and fried, and the salad, the tofu. And in here, there's the rice that they grow nearby. They also have a fishery where the fish comes from. You notice that this is a different type of meal, and the 3 slides that I've showed you have tatami seating, chairs, and this is a hybrid. There's a hole under here, and we can rest, stretch our legs, but we still get to sit on tatami. This is at Yamaka no Yu in the Kaida Plateau, where the ladies in the old days used to travel to go to the silk factory, spent 1 night on their way to the mountains. Now, this is lovely Yukiko-san, and I want to draw your attention on this particular dish, which is an oba magnolia leaf, a dried magnolia leaf on a burner. Underneath there's a small fire that warms up this white miso and red meat with mushrooms and some onions. Now, if you're vegetarian, you'll have vegetables. Oba leaf have a particularly lovely aroma that is transferred onto the food. It was used in the old days to preserve food and wrap rice, as we can see on this lunch that we have on the day we leave Osokuten. Now, this lunch is made to us by a bunch of 80-something-year-old ladies. So we're helping them stay busy and also have an opportunity to taste this delicious local food. But to me, there's one highlight, which is the single one highlight that always is the best on tour. And it really is the people. It's you coming to Japan and allowing me to share my passion and love for Japan, but also asking me lots of questions. Your curiosity really allows me to see things in different ways and to question myself. And always, it's always a pleasure to learn something more. Here we are at Ochiai, approaching Ochiai, And they're all very happy because I haven't told them yet that we need to go to this mountain where our inn is. This is a east meets west, Yohei, with a group of walkers meeting a group of Japanese walkers. When Japanese people meet us along the way, and I always encourage you to say hello to them. I'm always happy to teach you some Japanese if you cannot speak it. It's amazing what you can learn when you talk to people. Japanese people have a different walking style from us. They often walk in groups for 2 or 3 days and cover the whole length of Nakasendo, perhaps, or the highlights of the Nakasendo over a period of time that could span over 2 or 3 years. So they form clubs or circles, and then they meet at regular intervals. But when they learn that we walk from Kyoto to Tokyo in 11 days, and by the way, we don't cover 500 kilometers on foot, we do about 160 to 180 kilometers, they're always shocked and incredibly surprised. This is a lady walkers bonding during a picnic. We have a bunch of picnics that we have along the Nakasendo, and there's always someone that we can talk to. This is a farmer growing leeks, which will probably end up on our tables. And here is a scary samurai on the battlefield of Sekigahara. He has illegally covered his number plate with the emblem, the crest of the E family. Remember, I showed it to you earlier. And he's here with his spear, and it's quite scary looking. But in fact, he's not. And we even got to ride in his E family Toyota car. This is a friend I made along the Nakasendo. He's a 93-year-old farmer. Thankfully, he wasn't harvesting potatoes, but sesame seeds. And I got some of that, which was much, much lighter to carry. But the real gift we received from him was the beauty of this carving on this storage house. This is a dragon, and it's Japanese mythology. In Japanese mythology, dragons breathe water and they control fire, and again, symbolism and protection from for the crop this time and the food for the fire. This is the Ando family, and this is the picture we took the first time I met them in 2015 or 16, I don't remember now. It is particularly meaningful to me because it was a shocking coincidence on that day. By talking to them, they make us lunch on one of the days that we walk. I found out that they are the parents of a friend of mine in Tokyo. What a coincidence, in a city of 35 million people, to bump into the parents of a friend in a village of 12 houses. This is the lovely Sakai family with Christina, Toru, and Dio. When we stayed with them and trained, I trained them on Nakasendo. They prepare an amazing meal, and they always remember that I can't eat raw onions, and so my meal is always very carefully prepared not to include any raw onions, and I never have to remind them. This is Yoko. Yoko is an interesting case of a lady who has married into a family. We're talking about generations that run these inns. They've been doing it for hundreds of years, centuries. Sometimes they stay and they are the 17th generation. Yoko is, she married into the family, so took over the business, and now she's incredibly busy running Maruya. Notice here, this is Tamuraya, where we talked a little bit about this earlier, and they make the sake. And this brings us to the last slide of, or second last slide of today's talk. I know it's been a little longer than the other ones, but I really couldn't cut it any more. And this is the lovely Hara families of Shinchaya. They are waving at us. It's probably their most favorite action. In Japan, waving is probably a national sport. And they wave at us until we or they disappear behind the horizon. Notice at the back here, there's an extra hand. This is their daughter. She's hidden behind her father. She's now learning the ropes as she will take over the business. And so she's practicing her waving skills. It's quite a coincidence that they do that, because over here to the left in their gardens, there's a lovely rock with a poem carved in it. In Japanese, it recites, Okuraretsu okuritsutsu kiso no aki. And loosely, my translation of it is hellos and goodbye along the Kiso Valley in autumn. And it's great because you really feel when you walk along the Nakasendo, all the people that you meet, you say hello and you say goodbye, and this natural flow is a particularly strong feeling. Now, it is our turn to wave goodbye until the next talk. But before that, I want to show you the arrival point of Nakasendo. This is Nihonbashi, the bridge of Japan, where it starts. All measurements are of distance in Japan are measured from here. So we start our walk at a bridge and we end it at another bridge and we cross the cycle. I hope I'll be around to see the work that is planned to get rid of this highway that is above the Nihonbashi bridge. Thank you so much for listening today. And it is now time for me to hand over to Rachel.
Hello. Thank you, Giorgio, for that amazing talk.
Thank you.
That's very insightful, and I felt quite personal from all of your experiences on. Yesterday, we calculated around 50 tours of the Nakasendo during your career with Walk Japan.
And you can
we can certainly see that all of that experience in the way that you speak. And I definitely enjoy your stories about the people that you meet. I know that that's the thing that stays with us most often after tours, the memories of the people that we meet. And it's great that you can go back and see many of those people and build the relationship over the years. So it's very warming and wonderful to hear about that. Thank you everybody for your questions and for staying with us until this point. If you do have any questions you would like to ask now, please go ahead and ask them in the chat function at the bottom. Before I get to asking Giorgio questions, I just want to address the one question which has become very frequent in our chat today, and that is, of course, the burning question of what's going on with Japan's borders and when can you come to Japan. At Walk Japan, we're doing our best to give you the most up-to-date information, keep you informed, keep everybody in the loop. And of course, we can't wait to start our tours again, and we can't wait to do so safely. To answer this question, we are going to put something together and send it to you in the post-Zoom email, something written and concrete that you can refer to. So please check your inboxes over the next week. During the next 7 days at some point, we will send a post-Zoom email, including that information. As I said, the most up-to-date that we know at the moment, as well as some answers to any other questions from today and the Zoom link recording. Okay, so let's get to some of the questions. Giorgio, you have quite a lot of things to get through. There's many thank yous from your fans in the audience. So let's start with one very good question. Yes, after a lot of walking, Mervyn asks, are there onsens along the walk? Very good question.
Yes, very good point. Ironically, I now live in Nozawa Onsen, which is an onsen town, and I didn't talk about onsen on this talk. Yes, there are onsen We visit at least 2 or 3, and many of the inns, Japanese inn, will have a hot bath, a hinoki pine bath, or nearby onsen. Some of them have taken the Corona time to go through refurbishment. So, for example, Maruya, we used to visit a nearby onsen in the mountains, but they now have a fantastic bath in the back where we can rest our bones to really rejuvenate and be ready for the next day's walk. So yes, there are onsen. Thank you, Mervyn.
Great. Yeah, good to know that, isn't it? I love going in the onsen too. And we have some comments here from people saying that it's great to relive the memories of the Nakasendo that they've done in the past, some with you, some with other tour leaders as well. And one concern here that you might be able to answer. I'm not sure I could walk 25 kilometers in a day, but 15 kilometers is fine. Okay. Does this mean the tour isn't for me?
No, absolutely not, because well, first of all, the 25-kilometer walking day is day 7. So we've had an opportunity to practice and build strength from day to day to reach a level of fitness where we can comfortably walk the 25-kilometer day. The walk itself is pleasant. There's a couple of steep sections, but nothing that's unmanageable. But for those of you who don't feel up to the challenge or want to just have a shorter day, we can actually break the walk at Nagiso, where you can catch a train to Kiso Fukushima, and you'll be walking approximately 7 or 8 kilometers. So that's absolutely fine. And this is true of pretty much any day on tour. And we've been running this tour for 30 years. So anything that could have gone wrong has already happened. And any concern that people might have, they've already been addressed. So we've got a wealth of experience in managing this. So talk to your tour leader, and maybe a couple of days in advance would be nice, but your tour leader will be able to adjust the walk to the level so that you still have a great time, enjoy it, and are ready the next day as well.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to the next questions about when and how to walk the Nakasendo. Giorgio, in your experience, when is the best time of year to walk the Nakasendo?
It's difficult. They're all great times. Between March is great because it's not so hot and it's very green. After March, you have the cherry blossoms or the peach blossoms. And after that, you have warmer days, which means you can enjoy the waterfalls more. My favorite time of the year is autumn, because I love the explosion of the red leaves on the trees. But really, any time is great.
Good. Yeah, there is Nakasendo available throughout the year, depending on what kind of person you are. You know, some of us are snow people, some of us are spring people, or even like to walk in the heat.
And throughout the tour, we have a variety of walks. One thing I forgot to mention when I was describing it is that we've tried to put together a selection of walks that offer different scenery, different type of walking, so that you get to see a little bit of everything. But also we have lowlands and highlands. So on one particular tour, you have you can experience snow on the highlands and maybe not snow on the lowlands, or cherry blossoms on the highlands in the beginning, or cherry blossom on the lowlands for later in the season.
Lovely. And the next question is also related to how we walk the Nakasendo. Do you need to buy special boots and clothes for this tour?
I don't think special boots it's regular hiking boots are fine. I would recommend ankle support, especially if you've twisted your ankles in the past, because we tend to do it over and over again. Walking poles are sometimes useful to have balance, especially when we're going up and down the passes, but we don't do any climbing, and there's no chain, there's nothing really technically too difficult for Nakasendo. I would say it's important to have a hat and gloves. Some walkers feel comfortable with the camel bags for water or a flask, whatever you need. In the pre-tour pack that we send you before joining the Nakasendo, there is a checklist of items that you will need on tour. And if you're in doubt, you can always email our customer services and they'll be able to help you.
Great. And maybe the last question related to the logistics of the tours. Is there a short version of the Nakasendo Way?
Yes.
How many days is that?
It's if you want to, if 11 days, 10 nights, 11 days, yeah, is too long, you can join our Kiso Road. And we currently have two versions of the Kiso Road, which have more or less walking, so you can further tune into your needs and walking styles. The Kiso Road, and maybe I'll do a talk on the Kiso Road, starts in Nagoya and ends in Matsumoto. And it's 5 days usually.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. We've got an interesting question from Connor here. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Giorgio. I've heard that travellers from Kyoto and Tokyo would first go to a temple where they would determine if they had an unlucky direction attached to them. For example, if east was deemed unlucky, they would instead route north or south to reach Tokyo in a roundabout way. And the question is, are these alternate paths also popular and historical?
I'm not sure, actually. I know many of them have been forgotten, and you're completely right about direction. It is, we have lucky and unlucky directions, and that's, but I'm not sure. I do think, but this is a personal observation based on what I've seen around me in Japan, that recently there's an increasing interest for from the local tourist associations or government offices that promote tourism to rediscover these walks. One example is our colleague Joshua, who is involved in the revitalization of the Sabakaido, that path that connected the Sea of Japan to Nakasendo. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was work, especially during this period of pausing, where travel isn't allowed. Local governments are, local tourist offices are getting ready for the big influx of tourism that will happen as soon as Japan opens up.
Great, thanks. The next question is more about how things work in the day-to-day. So somebody's commented to say they're very impressed with your explanation of Japanese history and culture in the walk. But when do you find the time to stop your traveling group to explain all these things? Do you stop for a long period of time at once, or do you walk and talk? How do you get the information across?
No, I stop. I have special points of interest that, so let me rewind. Nakasendo Way is a journey. And so the tour itself is a journey. So when a tour leader talks, they are building the talk for the next day. So it's a process of accumulation. So none of the talks I make on my tour are coincidences. It's a very well prepared tool, which I train people on, and I've been trained on. So there are key points that allow me to structure my stops so that we can have a rest after a walk, but next to a feature that allows me to talk. And then I build from one day to the other. Just an example is the talk I give at Hikone when I introduced the 3 unifiers of Japan, and then to then be able to introduce the E family and their work, and then allows me to then talk about the Battle of Sekigahara. So it all fits in very well and serves different purposes, but it's never a coincidence. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll just run through maybe 3 or 4 more questions that we have here.
Easy one.
Easy ones, okay, and we'll leave the rest, we will get round to in the email. Please feel free to submit any more questions if you do have them. We're more than happy to answer by email later. So something that I actually wonder as well, somebody here is saying, I'm so glad you had the chance to walk the Nakasendo recently. Have all those wonderful inns survived the present crisis?
Yes, I must say, when I put together this presentation, I was very sad because I had all these feelings, because it is an emotional journey for us as well. But then as I put things together and I remember the families, and it really has brought warmth to me. So the short answer for the most part is yes, because of course there is domestic travel that is happening within Japan at the moment. And there are a number of incentives and subsidies that the government is offering to those who have been affected so badly by COVID. And these inns are entitled to receive these incentives. Some of the inns are historical buildings, and therefore they have other incentives and other sponsorship that they can get. Some other ones, and for the most part, and I'm talking about places like Maruya or the more rural areas, they own the land and they own the property and they've owned it for generations, and the husband has a different business which brings in money. I saw them, I think it was last year in spring. I live in Nagano Prefecture now, which means I get a subsidy, a little discount for traveling within the prefecture, because that's promoted by not traveling extensively throughout Japan. And I've had the pleasure to see many of them. So they're all doing well. They're all looking forward to foreigners visiting Japan. And one interesting comment that one of them made was that it is so difficult to look after Japanese guests, and it's so easy to welcome foreigners because they're so excited and everything's so new and it's so much fun. So
okay.
yeah.
That's good to hear, thank you. I'll combine the next two questions about autumn. As you mentioned, you like to walk in autumn. There's a few follow-up questions for that.
Okay.
How about the typhoon risk, and which months are best?
Okay, I would say typhoon risks is in October and September. And so I like early November or late October, personally, because of the temperatures and so on. Also because I'm a beach person, more of a mountain person. So in the summer, I like to go to the beach. But yes, October is great. Safety first. In terms of typhoon, we're always keeping a close eye on the weather. And the operations team always offers support to the tour leaders on tour, and it's a ongoing support. You may think the tour leader is in his or her own on tour, but they're in close contact with the operations team and the office in Kyushu, which provides support and alternatives. One example I can give you, not so recent anymore. About 4 years ago, I was on a tour called Highlights of Japan, and I was in Kanazawa, and that was probably the first time since I lived in Japan that I can remember that the typhoon hit Kanazawa. It's a different tour, but it's just an example of what we can do. So we were stuck in that city for an extra night. The booking team extended our stay at the hotel. You know, nobody gets out, nobody gets in, so they had availability. And I reshuffled. I organized a pottery class making for my group and a short city walk rather than going to the mountain pass that we were going to do. So we still try to do something because it's important that we walk and we have to get to the next point. But if it's very heavy rain, or if, we will not put anyone in danger.
Okay, thank you. The last question now then. we will get to the other questions in the email. There's some very interesting questions about the history of women on the Nakasendo and young people's involvement, how to do the Nakasendo on your own. So we will answer those questions in the email. The last question we'll answer today is quite an inspiring question from Rodney that says, they're planning to do the Kiso Road, and along with 90-year-old mother. She's in very good shape. Do you have advice for her to prepare for and do the walk?
Yeah, stay healthy and fit. 90 isn't the oldest person who walked on tour with us. I think it was 96. They were not in a great shape, so there had to be adjustments and accommodations made for this person to walk. But the memory that they made, they still talk about it, and I don't know if it was 10, 15 or 20 years ago. So yes, please join us.
Fantastic.
I'd like to lead that tour. I'd want to do that tour.
Thanks. All right, so as I said, we'll get round to answering the rest of your very insightful questions in the email. We do have some next steps if anybody would like to make more contact with us. If you have particularly burning questions that you would like answered one-to-one, or that are a little bit more complicated, or if you are interested in asking about joining at the Nakasendo Way or any other of our tours, please contact customer service here. You can also always go to our website, walkjapan.com. We have a lot of information there, and it's very easy to get in touch with us. Also, if you are interested more in the history of the Nakasendo Way or some other accounts, one of the books on our reading list is William Scott Wilson, Walking the Kiso Road. It's a great read, whether or not you're planning on walking the Nakasendo Way or the Kiso Road, if you would like a bit more information. And we also have a reading list that we do send out before people come on any of our tours. The reading list can be accessed at walkjapan.com, in Japan information, and then in the recommended reading. So please feel free to have a browse of that if you would like to. Can you move to the next page, please, Giorgio? Thank you, and one more. Thank you. And we will be holding some more Talk Japan events, hopefully on different tours, and considering your feedback from today. If you would like more information about when those Talk Japan events are going to be, please follow our social media, Instagram and Facebook. You can also check walkjapan.com for information, and we will be sharing details in our newsletter. You can register for free for our newsletter via the website. There's a sign-up page there. Thank you so much for joining. It's been great to hear all of your questions, and thank you, Giorgio, for your lovely personal account of times along the Nakasendo Way.